He was 3 years old and had never said my name, not once. 27 specialists later, my house sounded like a hospital, and my son still lived behind glass. Be honest with me. If a kid with muddy hands did more in 15 minutes than the entire system did in 3 years, what would you do? My name is Robert Villa. The articles call me a billionaire. Like that explains anything. Companies' real estate. The kind of mansion where the glass doors throw sunlight across the floor like spilled diamonds, and still none of it could buy the one thing I wanted. My little boy saying, "Dad." Ethan was born without sight, perfect eyes that didn't register the world, a perfect mouth that never shaped a word, and I built a therapy room in the East Wing that cost more than most clinics, soft cream walls, machines, blinking like applause shelves full of tools that promised progress except the loudest sound. In that room was grief, you know what I mean? That heavy quiet that makes grown people whisper so they don't wake the sadness. The morning everything shifted, I stood behind the observation window with Dr. Heinrich Müller, tall, wire-rimmed glasses, a reputation so shiny, people bowed to it. He had tried frequencies in headphones, textured boards for touch, warm compress, cool compress, call and response. Without the response, and when he slipped off his gloves, "I already knew. I am very sorry, Mr. Villa," he said gently, like soft words would hurt less. "Your son has built walls I do not know how to climb." I told him to leave, not proud of it, but the only thing I could control right then was a door and the sound it made when it closed. Yeah, that happened. If it were you, what would you have done? 3 miles away, paint peels from a small rental where a woman named Carol ties back her hair and counts hours instead of investments. Her daughter Penny is 4, all curiosity and sun, pockets full of smooth stones and feathers and buttons that caught the light. Just right, the kind of treasures you only notice when your heart still has its windows open. That day, the usual sitter was sick buses lined up like a miracle, and Carol brought Penny to my house because life sometimes pushes two worlds together and says, "Now." Margaret met them at the side entrance. She's our head nurse, the quiet spine of this place, the person who stayed while specialists rolled their suitcases back out. Steady hands, steady eyes. She gave the rules like she always does. The East Wing is private. The garden door by the therapy room stays closed. "Please keep your little one close," Carol promised, fast, embarrassed, grateful to be there at all. Penny promised too, the way kids promise and mean it, until the world calls their name from the other side of a door. While Carol vacuumed a room big enough to echo, Penny pressed her face to the window and fell in love with the only part of my property the landscapers can't tame, a wild patch by the pond. Tall grass and clover, dandelions bright as lost stars. Mud so rich it could grow anything. You whispered to it, she slipped outside, small shoes. Tapping stone, walked straight to the mud like the earth had texted her a location pin. Wait. Where was Ethan? This matters. Most afternoons, Margaret wheeled him out to that same wild patch because she believes in sunlight, like some people believe in saints. Good for you, even when nothing else is. She stepped inside to fix his lunch, 10 minutes. That's all this story needed. Penny knelt by the pond and started shaping the mud with steady, careful hands. A bird, a flower, a turtle humming to herself. Not a tune I knew, just the easy music kids make when no one is grading them. And in that same moment, my son tilted his head the smallest fraction, the first crack in a 3-year pattern of stillness, not toward a screen, not to a beeping machine, but toward wet earth and crushed clover, and a little girl being exactly who she is. She saw him just a few feet away, a small boy in a special chair, eyes that didn't track hands resting like they'd been told not to hope. "Oh," she said, soft and surprised. "Hi. I didn't see you there," she told him. Her name said she was 4, asked how old he was, like, It wouldn't be strange if he answered. He didn't, and she didn't flinch. My grandpa didn't see good either, she added with matter-of-fact kindness, so I talk extra. Then she did the one thing every credentialed expert missed. She took his hand, not with latex and a clipboard, not like a test, not from a distance that says, "I'm scared of you." She pressed a small mud bird into his palm, folded his fingers around it, and said, "There. Now you can feel what I made. It's a bird. Here's the wing. I put a flower petal. Because birds need pretty things too. 1 second, 2, 3. And then Ethan's hand tightened barely just a millimeter, just enough to say, "I'm here," without saying anything at all. "Stop. Feel that." I did from the other side of glass. Margaret saw it first. She found me in my office and did something people don't do in a house like mine. She didn't knock. "You need to come," she whispered. Hope and terror braided together. I told her I was done with hope. She put a finger to her lips. "Please." We slipped behind a curtain to the little garden window that feels like a church pew, and there they were. Penny in the grass, hands glazed with earth, placing her mud creatures like offerings, and Ethan, my Ethan, holding the bird, like it had a heartbeat, his head angled toward her voice, his shoulders always tight, letting go a fraction. Then the dandelion. "These are wish flowers," she told him. Lifting the white puff to his lips, "You blow. And make a wish," she showed him. With a tiny breath, waited, and my son's mouth parted. The smallest puff escaped, and 3 seeds lifted. I put my hand over my mouth and felt something in my chest split open. The sound that came out of me wasn't dignified. It was new air. "What would you have done? Rush out there, pull her away." I almost did. Old habits are loud. "Get her away from him," I told Margaret. Germs. Liability, fear, all the expensive words. Margaret's hand on my sleeve was gentle but strong. "Look at your son," she said. "Really look." So I did, and I stayed. We both stayed. Carol reached the garden before anyone could. Radio security panic written all over her. Because this is how fast a good job vanishes when you don't have a safety net. "I'm so sorry," she said, trying to pull Penny back. "We have to go." Penny eased free. Not rude, just certain. "But he's my friend," she said that word, landing like a bell in a house that had forgotten it. I walked over and Carol braced for a rich man's anger. I surprised us both. I asked for her daughter's name because names are a kind of respect. "Money can't fake, Penny," she said, and I heard myself ask, "Would you bring Penny tomorrow?" "Please." Carol stared like I was testing her. "You don't have to pay extra," she blurted. "If it helps him, we'll come." We shook hands right there by the mud. No NDA, no lawyers. 2 parents standing in the only honest corner of my life. That night, the mud bird dried on Ethan's nightstand. Margaret offered to seal it under something clear and official. I told her not to touch it. I sat beside his bed and watched his hand rest open toward that ugly, priceless thing in a house full of rare objects. This was the first one that meant anything to him, which made it the most valuable thing I owned. Before dawn, I checked again. His fingers searched the blanket, like a question the moment they brushed the bird. He softened, and a small sound folded out of him, not speech, but unmistakably content. If you've waited 3 years to hear a voluntary sound, you know how loud quiet can be. Penny returned the next morning, the way children return, running bag of treasures banging against her side. He kept the bird, she asked, with eyes so bright. Even the sun seemed late. "He did," I said. And she smiled at him, like turning up the light. She placed a smooth river stone in his free hand and narrated the feeling, like a warm egg. "See the white line, follow it with your finger." Ethan's fingers moved back and forth. Then she brushed a blue feather across his wrist. He flinched and reached to follow the softness. "It tickles," she giggled, tucking it into his pocket like a secret. For an hour she gave him textures, bark ridges, acorn rattle, tree rings under his fingertips, touch as language. The room for words different. Then the clay, this kind doesn't dry, she announced, like breaking news, tearing off a piece and pressing it into his palm. We can make anything and squish it again. She closed her hand over his and guided him, slow, patient. Squeeze, release, shape. Try again. His face changed. A tiny furrow of focus, lips parted, breath evening out. He squeezed, and the clay gave. He squeezed again, and a small sound rode out on his breath. The sound your body makes when something inside says yes. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Penny asked if he could sit on the ground, not the chair, the grass we'd strapped him into safety for so long. We forgot people learned before there were straps. Margaret looked to me for a call. I said yes. We lifted him down, and he settled awkward. First, then his hands found the earth like travelers finding the right station. Penny grinned at the mud. Best part, she whispered. Hands in. Not to make anything, just to feel. He sank, his fingers went still, then dug the tiniest bit. The elegant motion of someone wanting more. Another sound stronger. This time I turned away because sometimes joy is grief leaving your body. Carol came to stand near me. You okay? She asked. I nodded and shook my head at the same time. He's 3, and I've never heard him make a sound on purpose. I said, your daughter. Words failed. She looked at Penny and said, like it was obvious, she's just being Penny. Here's the twist. I didn't see coming, and it flipped my life like a coin. I had spent 3 years dragging Ethan toward my world. Bright lights and verbal milestones. Standardized charts and timelines printed in glossy binders. And my son's first language wasn't any of that. His first language was weight, texture, rhythm, breath. The shocking truth wasn't that Ethan was blind. The shocking truth was that we were. He wasn't failing our tests. We were failing to meet him where he already lived. Do you think that's fair? That a child only counts when he speaks in the dialect of a chart? Not everyone clapped for that revelation. My PR lead texted that allowing an untrained minor around a medically vulnerable child could be a reputational risk. A lawyer called and used the word liability 3 times in one sentence. Dr. Mueller asked to return, not to redo, to observe, to learn the machine that had failed us, was still very good at telling me what not to do. I made a different decision. We drew a circle around Ethan and called it human. Margaret would supervise to protect the gentle pace I paid Carol for her hours, and set boundaries to protect Penny from becoming anyone's miracle worker. Short sessions, breaks, lunch in the garden. No cameras, no dramatizing. No one turning a little girl into a treatment plan or a boy into a brand, just showing up and learning. Days folded into weeks. Penny's treasure bag became a library. Heavier stones to teach weight leaves with deep veins to trace like rivers, seed pods that rattle shells that whisper. When you hold them close, she told stories that walked beside sensation clouds, shaped like dragons, a cat with 3 legs that still jumps high. The creek where she found the stone, Ethan started anticipating her. His hands opened when the gravel crunched under her shoes. His head turned when she started talking. He reached without being guided, the day he took a bite of a sandwich with her. Help, that simple, sacred act most kids master before anyone expects it. Penny clapped like a stadium, and I cried quietly, because sometimes the small thing isn't small at all, it's a gate. I asked her why she thought he liked being with her. She looked at me like adults complicate what kids understand. Because I listened to him, she said. I said the old line, but he doesn't talk. And she shook her head gently, aught with mouth words. He talks with how he holds stuff, how his breathing changes, how his face moves. You just gotta pay attention to the ways that aren't words. Tell me that isn't wisdom. Go ahead. One hot Tuesday by the pond, she shaped another little bird from clay and set it in his hand. Then she opened her own. She didn't prompt, didn't push, just waited with trust, and Ethan, my boy, who had never offered anything to anyone, lifted the clay bird and placed it in Penny's palm, a gift from his world to hers, freely, given. No one spoke, because it would have been rude to interrupt. I won't sell you a miracle. He didn't stand up and recite the alphabet. But later, when she lifted another dandelion, he took a bigger breath and puffed. Half the seeds rose like tiny kites, and then maybe to my ear and Margaret's ear the first hint of a sound, with meaning, not a word. The direction of one, maybe the letter that starts my name, maybe hers. We didn't chase it, we let it be. Here's the part that stirs arguments at dinner tables. I started funding something new, not another wing with brushed steel and catered ribbon cuttings. A network of sensory gardens and parent workshops that begin where Penny began: touch first, follow the child's interest. Assume competence, honor, silence, use nature as curriculum. We brought in therapists willing to unlearn and relearn. We hired Carol to help design because there's a kind of practical wisdom you can't buy from a panel. And when a donor asked if we would leverage the story, I said, we'll tell it. If we tell it right, no miracle cure headlines, no inspiration gimmicks, just a father saying we were looking the wrong way. Some clinicians pushed back, fair evidence matters. But so does a child sleeping with a stone in his hand, a feather under his pillow, a mud bird on the nightstand like a compass. So does the breath he takes when he touches bark or clay. So does a boy reaching for a friend. Let me ask you, should the 4-year-old have to teach people like me what connection looks like? Do we worship machines and forget play? Do we pay lip service to inclusion while building systems that only listen to one language? If it were you, what would you have done when legal said no and your kid finally said something with his hands? You know what I mean? At night, I still pass those glass doors. The house is quiet, but not the heavy quiet anymore. It's the kind that happens when a party ends and 2 friends stay to stack plates and talk low while the light fades. Ethan may never speak the way a chart predicts. And I'm learning that isn't the point. Ask me if my son communicates, yes, in the language he trusts. Ask me if he has a friend, yes. Small, fearless, muddy hands. Ask me if I can hear him now. I can, because I finally stopped shouting in my language long enough to listen in his. So here's where I leave you with something to wrestle. Is it fair that play gets treated like extra credit, while touch gets treated like a hazard? That we teach parents to manage devices before we teach them to notice breath and rhythm? That a housekeeper's daughter had to show a man like me how to meet his own child? Do you think that's fair, or is it time to change the language of our charts, the shape of our rooms, the way we decide what progress looks like? Because somewhere right now, a little kid with muddy hands is about to walk into a very expensive room and teach it how to breathe. If this hit you, tap like so. More people hear it. Subscribe if you want stories told the way life actually feels, messy and hopeful and human. And then talk to me in the comments. If you've met a child who talks without mouth words, tell us how you learned to listen. If you disagree and think I'm romanticizing, say that too. I'm not afraid of a good argument. If you're a teacher who sneaks sensory play into a day stuffed with tests, share your tricks and answer me straight. If it were you, what would you have done? Do you think that's fair? Because the next chapter is already growing in the gardens we're planting, and I want you here when the dandelions lift.